My name is Harper Vance. I am 28 years old. And 15 years ago, my own parents threw me out of the house when I was just 13. Last week, they showed up at my Uncle Arthur's will reading, the man who raised me for the past 15 years, with confident smiles and a private attorney, absolutely certain they would walk out with millions. But when attorney Barbara Sterling opened that sealed envelope and began reading, those smiles vanished. And when she reached Clause 7, my mother, the woman who once declared I was no longer her daughter, shot to her feet, her face chalk white, her mouth hanging open in disbelief. Before I tell you what happened next, if you enjoy stories about justice and family boundaries, take a second to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Where are you watching from right now? And what time is it there? Drop a comment and let me know. To understand why my mother reacted that way, I need to take you back to the summer of 2010 when I was a 3-year-old girl who believed she was the root cause of every problem in her family. Growing up in a modest house in working-class Akron, Ohio, I learned early that love in our family wasn't distributed equally. My father, Vernon Vance, worked as an auto mechanic at a Chevrolet dealership downtown. He was a man of few words, and most of those words agreed with whatever my mother said. My mother, Beverly, worked the checkout line at a local Kroger grocery store and ran our household with the precision of someone who always knew exactly who deserved what. My sister Savannah was 2 years older than me. She had Mom's golden blonde hair, Mom's bright blue eyes, and Mom's easy laugh. Everyone said so. Savannah looks just like you did at her age, Beverly, they would say. And Mom would beam. I looked like our late grandmother, Dad's mother. Brown hair, brown eyes, quiet disposition. Mom never said it was a bad thing. She just never said much about me at all. The differences showed up everywhere. For Savannah's 15th birthday, Mom threw a party with 15 guests, a 3-tier cake from a fancy bakery in Highland Square, and a karaoke machine rental. For my 13th birthday, 3 months later, it was the 4 of us around the kitchen table with a marked-down cake from the Kroger where Mom worked. The frosting said happy birthday with no name, a generic leftover from someone else's canceled order. I didn't realize what was happening until I was 12. That is when I discovered Savannah had a college savings account that had been opened when she was 5 years old. 8 years of deposits, thousands of dollars. I asked Mom why I didn't have one. She looked at me like the question surprised her. Savannah needs money for college, she said. You will figure something out. You are good at adapting. That was the first time I understood my place in this family. I was the spare child, kept around, but never truly wanted. The summer of 2010 changed everything. In April of that year, I applied for the Ohio STEM Summer Academy at Ohio State University. It was a 6-week residential program for students who showed exceptional promise in science and mathematics. The scholarship covered everything: tuition, room and board, materials. Total value $4,200. I didn't tell anyone I applied. I had learned not to get my hopes up out loud in that house. On May 15th, the acceptance letter arrived. Out of over 2,000 applicants from across Ohio, 50 students had been selected. I was one of them. For exactly one afternoon, I felt like I mattered. Then, Savannah found out about a Broadway performing arts intensive in New York that her drama teacher had mentioned. 3 weeks. No scholarship. Price tag $3,800. That night at dinner, Mom announced the solution she had worked out in her head. Harper, you will decline that science thing. We can't afford to send both of you to summer programs, and Savannah's camp will help her college applications. She said it like she was discussing meal planning, not crushing someone's dreams. I stared at my plate. The words came out before I could stop them. No. The whole table went silent. Even the refrigerator seemed to stop humming. Excuse me. Mom's voice dropped to that dangerous register I had heard her use on store customers who tried to use expired coupons. This scholarship isn't your money to redirect, I said, my voice shaking but clear. I earned this. It is mine. Mom looked at me like I had transformed into a stranger right before her eyes. If you can't sacrifice for this family, she said slowly, then you are not part of this family. At 13, I thought she was just angry. I didn't realize she meant it literally. 3 days after that dinner, I came home from the Akron Public Library to find my belongings packed into 2 black garbage bags sitting on the front porch. My mother stood in the doorway, arms crossed. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked resolved, like someone who had just finished an unpleasant chore. "I called Arthur," she said. "He will be here to pick you up. From now on, you are his problem." I stood there on the porch I had known my entire life, trying to process what was happening. Behind Mom, I could see Dad in the hallway. He didn't look at me. He didn't say anything. I looked up at the second-floor window. Savannah was watching from behind the curtain. When our eyes met, she stepped back into the shadows of her room. She didn't come down. I waited on that porch from 0 inches the evening until 10 at night. 4 hours. My mother went back inside after the first 5 minutes. The porch light never came on. Uncle Arthur lived in Chicago, over 5 hours away. He drove through the night to get to me. When his silver Ford Taurus pulled into the driveway, I was still sitting on those garbage bags, knees pulled to my chest. He got out without saying anything at first, just walked up, looked at me, and wrapped me in a hug so tight I couldn't breathe. "From now on," he said quietly, "you have a home." That night, as we drove west through the darkness toward Illinois, I didn't know that my mother had signed a document before Uncle Arthur left. I didn't know what it meant. I was just a scared kid staring out the window, wondering what I had done wrong. It would take 15 years for that document to resurface. And when it did, it would change everything. Uncle Arthur's house in Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood wasn't a mansion, but it felt enormous compared to the cramped space I had occupied in my family's home. For the first time in my life, I had a room that was entirely mine. More importantly, I had someone who believed in me. Uncle Arthur had built Vance Real Estate Group from scratch, a commercial real estate company he had started with a single small office building he purchased after working double shifts for 6 years. By 2010, he owned 8 properties across the Chicagoland area. He never married, never had children. When I arrived on his doorstep with nothing but 2 garbage bags, he didn't just take me in, he invested in me. Over the next 4 years, I poured myself into school. I graduated from Lincoln Park High in 2014 as class valedictorian, president of the math club with a 4 unweighted GPA. Northwestern University offered me admission with a partial scholarship to their Kellogg School of Management. By 2018, I had my bachelor's degree in finance, graduating summa cum laude with a 3.94 gigapascals. Uncle Arthur had given me internship opportunities at Vance Real Estate Group. Starting my sophomore year, I learned the business from the ground up. Data entry, lease analysis, tenant relations, property assessments. In 2019, after 18 months at a massive accounting firm I will call Whitman & Price, I earned my CPA certification. 1 year later, Uncle Arthur offered me a position as controller. By 2021, I was CFO. On my 26th birthday, I managed a portfolio of 12 commercial properties with a combined value of $23.7 million. Uncle Arthur sent me an email that day. I still have it saved. The subject line read, "To my daughter." The message was simple. You don't need to prove anything to the people who abandoned you, but you do need to prove to yourself that you are worthy. You have. Happy birthday, Harper. In 15 years, my biological family reached out exactly 3 times. The first was in 2012. My mother called Uncle Arthur's phone, not mine, to ask for $5,000. Dad had lost his job at the Chevrolet dealership. Times were hard. Surely Arthur could help his own brother. Uncle Arthur declined. He told me about the call afterward, his jaw tight. "They haven't asked about you once," he said. "Not how you are doing in school, not if you are okay. They just want money." The second contact came in 2016. Savannah mailed me a wedding invitation. No personal note. "No, I hope you are well." Just the formal printed card with my name and Uncle Arthur's Chicago address. I didn't attend. I didn't send a gift. I didn't respond at all. The third was in 2020. My mother sent me an email, the first direct contact she had initiated since throwing me out. The subject line was "checking in." The message mentioned that she had seen an article in the Chicago Tribune business section about Vance Real Estate Group expanding into the North Shore market. She hoped I was doing well and suggested we should catch up sometime. I deleted the email without responding. I wasn't holding grudges. I had simply built a life that didn't include them, and I saw no reason to change that. In the summer of 2024, Uncle Arthur received a diagnosis that changed everything. Congestive heart failure, advanced stage. The doctors gave him 12 to 18 months. He lasted 8. During those final months, Uncle Arthur met with his estate attorney multiple times. He updated his will in June 2024, 6 months before he passed. When I asked him about it, he just smiled. "Everything is taken care of," he said. "You focus on the business. I have handled the rest." I didn't know what he had written. I didn't know about the clauses. I trusted him completely. I had no idea what was coming. Uncle Arthur passed away on the 28th of February 2025. He went peacefully in his sleep at Northwestern Memorial Hospital with me holding his hand. 1 week later, on March 7th, I was in my office at Vance Real Estate Group when my phone buzzed with an unknown Ohio number. I almost didn't answer. Harper. The voice was immediately recognizable. 15 years hadn't changed my mother's particular way of saying my name, like she was tasting something she wasn't sure she wanted to swallow. Beverly. I kept my voice neutral. Not Mom, just her name. A brief pause. I could almost hear her recalibrating. "I heard about Arthur," she said. "I am so sorry for your loss. I was thinking I should come up for the memorial service. Pay my respects." "The memorial was 3 days ago," I replied. Another pause. "Oh, well. I also heard there is a will reading coming up. Family has a right to attend these things, you know, especially when it involves a brother's estate." There it was, the real reason for the call. "How did you find out about the will reading?" I asked. "I have an attorney, Robert Lockwood. He made some calls." The name sparked a faint memory. Uncle Arthur had mentioned a Robert Lockwood once, an attorney he had consulted years ago and decided not to work with. I spoke to Barbara Sterling, Uncle Arthur's estate attorney. The next morning, she confirmed my suspicions. Beverly had hired Robert Lockwood to file a claim challenging the will. Their grounds, undue influence, alleging that I had manipulated a sick man in his final months. They were also demanding to attend the will reading as immediate family members of the deceased. I stared at the photo of Uncle Arthur on my desk. In the picture, he was smiling, almost like he had known this would happen, almost like he had planned for it. Barbara Sterling's office occupied the 90th floor of the Willis Tower, Chicago's tallest building. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, you could see all the way across Lake Michigan on a clear day. March 10th wasn't clear. Rain streaked the glass as Barbara laid out the situation. "Robert Lockwood filed a formal challenge to the will on behalf of Vernon and Beverly Vance," she said, sliding a document across her desk. "The claim alleges undue influence. They are arguing that you isolated Arthur from his family during his illness and pressured him to change his estate plan." I read through the filing, my stomach tightening with each paragraph. "They are demanding 50% of the estate," Barbara continued. "Their legal theory is that as Arthur's only surviving sibling, Vernon should be entitled to inherit under intestacy rules or at minimum receive a significant share that reflects the natural bonds of brotherhood." "Natural bonds?" I repeated. Vernon and Arthur hadn't spoken in 8 years before I came to live with Uncle Arthur. "Did you know that?" Barbara nodded. "I am aware. Arthur told me the whole history, but that is not what concerns me about this filing." She pulled out another page from her folder. "They don't need to win this case. If this goes to litigation, the estate could be frozen for 12 to 18 months during discovery and trial. Meanwhile, the properties need management. Tenants need attention. Bills need to be paid. A protracted legal battle could cost hundreds of thousands in legal fees and potentially devalue the entire portfolio. So, they are betting I will pay them off to make them go away." "That is the strategy," Barbara agreed. "It is not unusual in estate disputes." I looked down at the challenge filing. In the section describing our family history, Beverly had written that I had abandoned my family and exploited Arthur's loneliness. The woman who threw me out was claiming I abandoned her. "Do you have any documentation about your circumstances in 2010? Barbara asked. "Anything that establishes what actually happened when you went to live with Arthur?" I thought back to that night on the porch, the garbage bags, the 4-hour wait, Uncle Arthur arriving in the darkness. "I was 13, I said. "I didn't exactly keep records. Arthur did." Barbara was already reaching for her phone. She dialed her assistant and asked for a specific file number from the archives. 20 minutes later, her assistant returned with a yellowed folder. Barbara opened it carefully, scanning the contents. Then she looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Harper, did you know about this?" She slid the document across the desk. The header read, Voluntary Relinquishment of Parental Rights and Transfer of Guardianship, dated the 15th of July, 2010. The document stated that Vernon James Vance and Beverly Ellen Vance, being of sound mind, voluntarily relinquished all parental rights and responsibilities for their minor daughter, Harper Marie Vance, and transferred full legal guardianship to Arthur Raymond Vance. At the bottom were 4 signatures: my mother's, my father's, Uncle Arthur's, and a notary public from Summit County, Ohio. File number 2010. GH5847. They didn't just kick you out, Barbara said quietly. They legally gave you up. They signed away their parental rights. As far as the law is concerned, Beverly and Vernon Vance stopped being your parents the moment they signed this document. My hands were trembling. I had been 13 years old, sitting on a porch in the dark. I had no idea my mother had been signing papers inside the house. What does this mean for their claim? I asked. Barbara's expression shifted. It means Vernon has no standing to claim inheritance through familial relationship. Legally, he is not your parent. He severed that connection himself in writing with witnesses 15 years ago. Barbara offered me 2 paths forward. Option 1. We negotiate, she said. I reach out to Lockwood, explain that their legal position is weaker than they realize, and offer a settlement. $500,000 to $1 million in exchange for them withdrawing their challenge and signing a waiver of any future claims. It is faster, cleaner, and avoids any public spectacle. And option 2, we proceed with the will reading as scheduled. They have demanded to attend as family members. We let them. Then we present the evidence, the guardianship transfer document, the full history, everything Arthur wanted disclosed in the event of a challenge. She paused. Arthur anticipated this. Harper. He left specific instructions for how to handle exactly this scenario. He wanted the truth on the record. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room of the house Uncle Arthur had left me, staring at the family photos on the mantel. There were pictures of me at every stage: high school graduation, college commencement, the day I got my CPA license, my first day as CFO. In every photo, Uncle Arthur was beaming beside me. There were no photos of Vernon or Beverly. Not one. I thought about Uncle Arthur's words from that email years ago. You don't owe them anything, but you owe yourself the truth. At 7 the next morning, I called Barbara. I want the will reading to proceed, I said. No settlement, no buyout. If they want to be present for this, let them. But we are not hiding anything. Are you sure? Once this becomes public. They chose to make this public when they filed their challenge. I am just respecting their choice. The will reading was scheduled for Friday, the 14th of March 2025, at 2 p.m., in the Sterling and Associates conference room, 5 days away. The next few days were a blur of preparation. My best friend, Chloe Carter, we had met when she joined Vance Real Estate Group as HR director 3 years earlier, helped me organize the documentation. She was the only person besides Barbara who knew the full story of my childhood. 47 emails, Chloe said, looking up from her laptop in my office on Wednesday evening. 47 emails from Arthur to you over 10 years documenting his relationship with you and his reasons for estranging himself from Vernon. The emails painted a clear picture. In 2002, Vernon had borrowed $80,000 from Arthur with a promise to repay it within 5 years. 23 years later, not a single dollar had been returned. That broken promise had fractured their relationship. My arrival in 2010 had nothing to do with their estrangement. It had already been festering for 8 years. Chloe also pulled the financial reports from my 3 years as CFO. Under my leadership, the Vance Real Estate Group portfolio had grown from $17.7 million to $23.7 million, a 34% increase in value. Occupancy rates averaged 96%. Tenant satisfaction scores were the highest in the company's history. On Thursday evening, I met with Dr. Miriam Foster, the therapist I had been seeing since my early 20s. Remember why you are doing this, she said. You are not seeking revenge. You are closing a chapter. There is a difference. What if I feel satisfaction when they realize they have lost? I asked. Dr. Foster smiled gently. That is called justice, Harper. Feeling validated when the truth comes out isn't the same as cruelty. The question is what you do afterward. I drove home that night through Chicago's rain-slicked streets, thinking about her words. I looked in the bathroom mirror before bed. She has no power over you anymore, I told my reflection. Only you get to decide your story now. Friday was coming, and I was ready. Okay, let me pause here for a second. If you have made it this far and you are wondering how I handled what came next, drop a comment with your prediction. What do you think Beverly did at the will reading? And if this story resonates with you, if you have ever had to set boundaries with family, don't forget to subscribe. We are just getting to the part you have been waiting for. Now, back to that Friday afternoon. The Sterling & Associates conference room occupied a corner of the 90th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Lake Michigan and the sprawling Chicago skyline. On a clear day, it would have been breathtaking. On the 14th of March 2025, the sky was overcast, the water a steel gray that matched my mood. I arrived 15 minutes early at 1:45 p.m. I wore a navy blue tailored suit. Professional, understated. My hair was pulled back in a simple bun. I had learned from Uncle Arthur that the most powerful people in the room never needed to announce themselves. The conference room could seat 20 at the main table with additional chairs arranged along the walls. When I entered, 14 people were already present. Barbara Sterling sat at the head of the table with 2 junior associates. Harrison Clark, the senior auditor from Whitman & Price, who had handled Uncle Arthur's accounts for a decade, occupied a seat near the window. Representatives from 3 charitable organizations filled several chairs: Lurie Children's Hospital, Habitat for Humanity Chicagoland, and the Great Lakes Protection Fund. Uncle Arthur had been a significant donor to all 3 for over 20 years. 5 senior staff members from Vance Real Estate Group sat together near the door. They had worked with Uncle Arthur for years and had known me since my intern days. Barbara caught my eye and nodded toward a seat at the center of the table directly across from where she would be reading the will. I took my place, arranging the folder of documents Chloe had prepared in front of me. Through the glass wall of the conference room, I could see the elevator lobby. At 2:03 p.m., the elevator doors opened. My mother stepped out first. Even from across the floor, I could see she dressed for the occasion. Black dress, pearl necklace, full makeup. Behind her came my father, my sister, and a man in an expensive suit carrying a Tom Ford briefcase. The show was about to begin. Beverly Vance entered the conference room like she owned it. That was always her way, projecting confidence she hadn't earned, claiming space she hadn't been given. She wore a black dress that looked new, and her pearl necklace caught the overhead lights as she surveyed the room with a practiced expression of dignified grief. Behind her, my father, Vernon, shuffled in, wearing a gray suit that didn't quite fit anymore. He had gained weight in the years since I had seen him. His eyes found me briefly, then darted away. He had always been good at looking away. Savannah followed in a pastel pink dress. An odd choice for a will reading, like she had gotten confused about what event she was attending. At 30, she looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the early morning flight from Ohio. Their attorney, Robert Lockwood, brought up the rear. He was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of polished confidence that came from decades of high-stakes litigation. His Tom Ford briefcase probably cost more than my first month's salary at Whitman & Price. Beverly's gaze swept the room until it landed on me. "Ah," she said, her voice carrying in that way she had perfected. "You are here already." I didn't stand. Beverly. The single word, her name, not Mom, made her pause mid-stride. Something flickered across her face. Then she recovered. "I was hoping we could speak privately before this starts. Family matters should be handled by family. The proceedings begin in 2 minutes," I said. "I am sure whatever you have to say can wait." Barbara Sterling rose from her seat. "Mrs. Vance, Mr. Vance, Miss Vance, Mr. Lockwood. There are seats arranged for attending parties along the wall. The main table is reserved for beneficiaries and estate representatives." Beverly's jaw tightened visibly. She had expected a seat at the center of things. Instead, she was being directed to the margins. She wasn't even at the table. Beverly didn't take her seat quietly. Instead, she detoured past the representatives from Lurie Children's Hospital, pausing to introduce herself with an expression of practiced sorrow. "I am Beverly Vance," she said loud enough for most of the room to hear. "Arthur's sister-in-law. We were quite close for many years before this unfortunate estrangement." She glanced meaningfully in my direction. The hospital representative, A woman in her 50s named Dr. Evelyn Rossi nodded politely but said nothing. Beverly continued undeterred. It is so tragic how some people come into a family and create division. Arthur was such a generous man, so trusting, perhaps too trusting. I kept my eyes on my folder. I didn't respond. I had learned long ago that Beverly fed on reactions. Savannah, settling into a chair against the wall, added her piece. Uncle Arthur used to visit us in Akron all the time when we were kids. I don't understand why she gets to sit up there and we are back here. Robert Lockwood was already taking notes, his pen moving across a legal pad, documenting everything, building their case, looking for any reaction he could twist. I gave him nothing. Beverly took her seat beside Savannah, but she wasn't finished. As Barbara organized her papers at the head of the table, Beverly's voice cut through the quiet room once more. A child who has been rejected by her parents usually has a reason. I just wish Arthur had seen through her the way we did. A mother always knows. The words hung in the air. Several people in the room shifted uncomfortably. Harrison Clark, the auditor, was staring at Beverly with open disbelief. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in 15 years. She hadn't changed at all. The same certainty, the same need to control the narrative, the same absolute conviction that she was the victim. Barbara cleared her throat. It is 2:10. We will begin. Barbara Sterling broke the seal on a large envelope with the careful precision of someone who had performed this ritual hundreds of times. This is the last will and testament of Arthur Raymond Vance, she began, her voice carrying the formal weight the moment demanded. Born the 4th of July, 1953, deceased the 28th of February, 2025. This document was executed on the 18th of June, 2024, and represents the final expression of Mr. Vance's wishes regarding the disposition of his estate. Beverly sat forward slightly, her pearl necklace catching the light. Barbara continued reading the preliminary sections. Article 1 confirmed Arthur's identity and residence. Article 2 declared him to be of sound mind. Barbara noted that a psychiatric evaluation had been conducted by Dr. Stephen Park on the 10th of June 2024, 8 days before the will was signed. The evaluation confirmed Mr. Vance possessed full testamentary capacity and was under no undue influence at the time of execution. I caught Beverly exchanging a glance with Robert Lockwood. They had been banking on challenging Arthur's mental state. This documentation complicated their strategy. Article 3 revoked all prior wills and codicils. Then Barbara turned to Article 4, the inventory of assets. At the time of death, Mr. Vance's estate included the following: 12 commercial properties located throughout Cook County and Lake County, with a combined assessed value of $18.2 million. Investment accounts containing diversified equity holdings valued at approximately $4.1 million. Cash and liquid assets totaling $1.4 million. I heard Savannah whisper to Beverly, "That is almost $24 million." Beverly nodded, her eyes calculating. Barbara looked up briefly. The will contains 47 pages. I will now proceed to Article 5, which addresses specific bequests and exclusions. She turned the page and adjusted her reading glasses. Article 5, regarding Vernon James Vance, brother of the deceased. Beverly actually smiled. She wouldn't be smiling for long. Barbara's voice was steady as she read the opening line. I make no provision in this will for my brother Vernon James Vance for the following reasons, which I wish to be read aloud and entered into the record. Beverly's smile flickered. Barbara continued reading Arthur's words. First, in March of 2002, Vernon borrowed $80,000 from me with a written promise to repay the full amount within 5 years. 23 years have passed. Not $1 has been returned. I have retained the original promissory note as documentation. Vernon's face went pale. He hadn't expected this. Second, on the 15th of July 2010, Vernon and his wife Beverly voluntarily executed a legal document relinquishing all parental rights to their daughter, Harper Marie Vance, transferring full guardianship to me. This document was properly witnessed and notarized. Beverly shot to her feet. What does that have to do with anything? Barbara paused, looked at Beverly over her glasses, and continued reading without acknowledging the outburst. The significance of this document is as follows. By legally terminating their parental relationship with Harper, Vernon and Beverly severed any claim they might have had to inherit from me through her. Harper is my legal heir. Vernon is not her legal father. Therefore, Vernon has no familial relationship with my designated heir, and no standing to challenge this will on grounds of family connection. Vernon stood now too. This is ridiculous. I am Arthur's brother, his blood brother. Robert Lockwood grabbed Vernon's arm, pulling him back down. But even the attorney's face had gone gray. Barbara reached into her file and produced a document. For the record, the original voluntary relinquishment of parental rights is on file with Summit County Family Court. File number 2010 GH5847. I have a certified copy here, which any party may examine. She laid the document on the table. Beverly stared at it like it was a live grenade. Beverly didn't sit back down. Her composure, that careful mask she had worn into the room, cracked visibly. Her voice rose, sharp and desperate. This is insane. That paper doesn't mean anything. We are still her family. Barbara's voice remained level. Mrs. Vance, I must ask you to take your seat. Disrupting the reading of a will is a matter the court takes seriously. Beverly ignored her. She pointed directly at me. She did this. She manipulated Arthur against his own family. She poisoned him against us. Dr. Evelyn Rossi from Lurie Children's Hospital looked uncomfortable. The charity representatives hadn't signed up for a family meltdown. Savannah tugged at Beverly's sleeve. Mom, sit down. People are watching. I don't care who is watching. Beverly's voice cracked. I want to know how this happened. Arthur loved Vernon. They were brothers. Finally, I spoke. My voice came out calm, steady, the way Uncle Arthur had taught me to speak in difficult negotiations. Never raise your voice. Make them strain to hear you. Beverly, you made a choice 15 years ago. You put my belongings in garbage bags and left me on a porch in the dark. Then you went inside and signed a document giving me away. I was 13 years old. The room was absolutely silent. That was your decision, I continued. Not mine, not Uncle Arthur's, yours. Everything that is happening today is simply the consequence of what you chose to do that night. Beverly's mouth opened, but no words came out. I looked at her steadily. I don't hate you, but I also don't owe you anything. You made sure of that when you signed that paper. Robert Lockwood was writing furiously on his legal pad, though I couldn't imagine what strategy he thought he could salvage. Barbara cleared her throat. If we may continue. I haven't yet read Clause 7. Beverly finally sank back into her chair, but Clause 7 was the one that would truly end her hopes. Barbara turned to page 12 of the will and paused. Then she read the words that would change everything. Article 7, Designation of Sole Beneficiary. The room held its breath. I hereby bequeath the entirety of my estate, including all real property, investment accounts, liquid assets, and personal effects, to my legally adopted daughter, Harper Marie Vance. Adopted. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Beverly's face went white. Actually white, like someone had drained the blood from her head. Adopted? Vernon's voice was hoarse. Since when? Barbara answered with the same calm precision she had used throughout. Mr. Arthur Vance formally adopted Harper Marie Vance on the 12th of September 2012, when she was 15 years old. The adoption was finalized in Cook County Family Court File Number 2012 AD 3291. As Mr. and Mrs. Vernon Vance had already legally relinquished their parental rights in 2010, no additional consent was required. Savannah stared at me. So, you are not even related to us anymore? I met her eyes. Not legally. Not since Mom and Dad signed me away. Barbara continued reading. Harper is not merely a beneficiary. She is my daughter in every way that matters, legally, practically, and emotionally. She has worked alongside me for years, proven her competence and integrity, and I trust her completely to continue the work I began. There is no one more deserving of this inheritance, and no one I love more. My vision blurred. I blinked back tears. Uncle Arthur had never told me about the full language of this clause. He had kept it a secret, waiting for this moment, knowing it might come. Beverly was shaking her head slowly, like someone trying to wake from a nightmare. This can't be legal, she whispered. Robert, tell them this can't be legal. Robert Lockwood didn't answer. He was staring at his legal pad, pen motionless. He knew the case was over. Barbara reached into her folder and withdrew a sealed envelope smaller than the others. There is one more item, she said. Mr. Vance left a personal letter for Harper with instructions that I offer to read a portion aloud during this proceeding if Harper consents. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Barbara opened the envelope carefully and unfolded a single handwritten page. Uncle Arthur's familiar script filled the paper. The same handwriting I had seen on birthday cards and emails and notes left on my desk over 15 years. Barbara began to read. Harper, if this letter is being read aloud, it means things happened exactly as I expected. Your biological family showed up looking for money they never earned from a man they never cared about. I am sorry you have to go through this, but I also know you are strong enough to handle it. A soft sound escaped Beverly's throat, almost a whimper. You came to me as a wounded child, thrown away by people who should have protected you. But you didn't let that define you. You transformed your pain into determination, your loneliness into independence, your rejection into resilience. I have never been more proud of anyone in my entire life. Barbara's voice softened slightly as she continued. I didn't save you, Harper. You saved yourself. I just gave you a place to do it. Everything you have achieved, your education, your career, your character, you earned through your own effort. I am leaving you my estate, not because you need it, but because you deserve it, and because I know you will use it to help others the way I tried to help you. Tears were streaming down my face now. I didn't try to stop them. Don't let them make you feel guilty for surviving them. Don't let them back in unless you choose to. You owe them nothing. You owe yourself everything. I love you, Harper. Forever your father, Arthur. Beverly made one last desperate play. She stood again, but this time her voice had shifted. The anger was gone, replaced by something that was meant to sound like wounded motherhood. Harper, sweetheart, I know things were hard when you were young. I made mistakes. I admit that now, but we are still blood. We can work through this. Can't we at least talk about dividing the estate fairly? I wiped my eyes and looked at her. You gave up the right to call me sweetheart 5 years ago. I want to contest this will, Beverly announced to the room. Robert, tell them we have grounds. Undue influence. Arthur was sick. She isolated him. Robert Lockwood finally spoke, though he sounded like a man reading his own obituary. Mrs. Vance, perhaps we should discuss our options privately. No, tell them we are going to fight this. Barbara interrupted by turning her iPad around to face the room. On the screen was an email thread. Mr. Lockwood, perhaps you would like to explain this to your clients. The room went quiet. Barbara read aloud. This is an email dated the 3rd of March 2022 from Arthur Vance to Robert Lockwood. The subject line is terminating services. In the email, Mr. Vance writes, Robert, I am ending our professional relationship. Your advice that I include Vernon in my estate plan, despite his years of financial exploitation and his treatment of Harper, is unacceptable. I will be engaging new counsel. She looked up at Robert. You previously represented Arthur Vance. You were terminated because you advocated for Vernon's interests over Arthur's wishes. And now you have accepted this case against Arthur's estate without disclosing that conflict of interest to your current clients. Robert's face had gone the color of old concrete. Beverly turned to stare at him. You told me we would win. He had no answer. Robert Lockwood stood up abruptly, gathering his Tom Ford briefcase with shaking hands. I need to review these documents, he said. His voice stripped of its earlier polish. We should discuss our options privately, Mrs. Vance. Discuss what? Beverly's voice was rising again. You are leaving right now in the middle of this. Robert didn't answer. He was already moving toward the door, walking with the stiff gait of a man who knew his career might be imploding. Robert, Beverly called after him. Robert, the conference room door closed behind him with a soft click. Beverly stood frozen, abandoned by her own attorney in front of everyone she had hoped to impress. Vernon hadn't said a word in minutes. He sat slumped in his chair, staring at the floor. He had spent his whole life following Beverly's lead, and now she had led them both off a cliff. Savannah was crying quietly. I couldn't tell if she was upset about the money or about the public humiliation. Beverly turned back to me one more time. The mask was completely gone now. Underneath it was just desperation. And beneath that, something that might have been the first stirrings of real regret. Harper, her voice broke. We are still a family, aren't we? Blood is blood. You could still. I stood up from the table. Beverly, you stopped being my family on the 15th of July 2010. You signed the document yourself. I didn't make that choice. You did. I gathered my folder and looked at her steadily. I don't hate you. I actually feel sorry for you, but you have no claim on me. Not legally, not emotionally, not in any way that matters. I turned to Barbara. Can we continue with the remaining articles? Barbara nodded. Beverly sat down heavily. She didn't speak again for the rest of the reading. Barbara turned to the next section with practiced calm. Article 9. Charitable bequests. The representatives from the 3 charitable organizations straightened in their seats. I direct that the following gifts be made from my estate. $500,000 to Lurie Children's Hospital to be used for the establishment of a scholarship fund for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. $300,000 to Habitat for Humanity Chicagoland for the construction of affordable housing in the greater Chicago area. $200,000 to the Great Lakes Protection Fund for water preservation and environmental education programs. Dr. Evelyn Rossi from Lurie Children's Hospital nodded solemnly. Arthur was one of our most consistent donors for over 2 decades. This gift will help hundreds of families. The representative from Habitat for Humanity added, we have built 6 homes with Arthur's previous donations. This will fund at least 4 more. Barbara continued. I also request that my daughter Harper continue the charitable giving programs I established during my lifetime at her discretion. I trust her judgment completely. I found my voice. I will honor everything Uncle Arthur built. A thought occurred to me as I looked at the 3 charity representatives sitting in this room. They weren't here because the law required it. They were here because Uncle Arthur had asked them to come. He had wanted witnesses, neutral parties who could testify to exactly what had happened here today. If Beverly and Vernon tried to pursue their case further, Uncle Arthur had anticipated every move. Dr. Rossi caught my eye and offered a small, kind smile. Arthur used to talk about you constantly. Every board meeting, every donor event, it was, Harper did this. Harper achieved that. He was so proud of you. I blinked back fresh tears. Even in death, Uncle Arthur had surrounded me with people who believed in me. When Barbara finished reading the final articles of the will, she turned to me. Harper, as sole beneficiary and executor, would you like to say a few words? I hadn't planned to speak, but 47 pairs of eyes were watching me, and I realized there were things that needed to be said. Not for Beverly's benefit, but for my own. I rose from my seat. Most of you knew Uncle Arthur far longer than I did. He took me in when I was 13 years old and had nothing. He gave me a home, an education, and most importantly, a family that chose to love me. I looked around the room at the Vance Real Estate Group employees who had watched me grow from an intern into a CFO, at the charity representatives who had witnessed Uncle Arthur's generosity for decades. With this inheritance, I intend to continue everything Arthur built. The properties will be managed with the same integrity he established. The charitable commitments will be maintained, and I will be establishing a new scholarship fund, the Vance STEM Scholarship for children from difficult family situations who need someone to believe in them. My eyes found Beverly still sitting rigid in her chair. As for my biological relatives, I hold no grudge. I have made peace with what happened. But peace doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen, and it doesn't mean opening doors that I have worked hard to close. I took a breath. Arthur taught me that family is about choice. The people who show up for you when everything falls apart, those are your family. By that definition, the people in this room who knew Arthur, who worked with him, who respected him. You are more my family than the people who share my DNA. I sat back down. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Harrison Clark, the auditor, began to clap. Others followed. Beverly didn't move. Barbara formally concluded the reading at 3:47 p.m. The will has been read in its entirety. All legal requirements have been satisfied. Miss Vance, you may contact our office next week to begin the transfer process. The estate should be fully settled within 14 business days. People began to rise, conversations murmuring to life around the room. Beverly stood slowly like a woman who had aged 10 years in 2 hours. Vernon was already shuffling toward the door, not looking at anyone. Savannah gathered her purse and followed her father without a word. Beverly lingered. She turned back to look at me one final time. Her makeup had smeared slightly around her eyes. The confident woman who had entered this room expecting millions now looked diminished, smaller somehow. She opened her mouth as if to say something. I saw her lips form what might have been the beginning of "I am sorry," but then she closed her mouth, turned away, and walked out. I watched her go. This woman who had thrown me away like damaged goods, who had signed papers to make it legal, who had shown up 15 years later expecting to profit from her cruelty. I felt a brief flicker of something. Not satisfaction exactly, not vindication, something more complicated. The strange emptiness that comes when a chapter finally closes. Dr. Rossi from Lurie Children's Hospital approached me as the room cleared. "Arthur talked about you every time we met," she said, shaking my hand. "He told me once that taking you in was the best decision he ever made. I can see why." She pressed a business card into my palm. "When you are ready to discuss that scholarship fund, please call me directly." Chloe appeared at my side, squeezing my arm. "You did it," she said quietly. "Arthur would be so proud." I looked at the photo of Uncle Arthur I had brought with me. I hoped she was right. I need to take a breath here for a second. That was the moment I had been dreading and hoping for at the same time. If you have ever had to stand up to someone who hurt you, someone who still believed they were the victim, you know how exhausting it is. Have you been through something similar? Tell me in the comments. And if you want to know what happened after that conference room emptied, stay with me. The story isn't over. 1 week after the will reading, Barbara Sterling filed a formal complaint with the Illinois State Bar Association. The subject: Robert Lockwood's ethical violations. I didn't ask her to do it. She did it because it was her professional obligation. When an attorney witnesses another attorney violating the rules of professional conduct, reporting is required. The complaint outlined 3 violations. First, conflict of interest. Lockwood had previously represented Arthur Vance and gained confidential information about his estate planning. Second, failure to disclose. Lockwood never told Beverly or Vernon about his prior relationship with Arthur. Third, misrepresentation. Lockwood had led his clients to believe they had a strong case when he knew or should have known that their legal position was fundamentally compromised. Barbara kept me updated throughout the process. 2 months after the filing in late May 2025, the Bar Association issued its ruling. Robert Lockwood was suspended from practicing law for 6 months. He was also fined $15,000 and required to complete additional ethics training. Within weeks of the suspension, 3 of Lockwood's largest clients quietly transferred their business elsewhere. I heard through legal community gossip that his firm's revenue dropped by roughly $200,000 that year. Chloe asked me once if I felt satisfied by Lockwood's downfall. "I didn't do anything to him," I told her. "He did this to himself. I just happened to be there when the consequences caught up." That was the truth. I hadn't sought revenge against Robert Lockwood. I hadn't filed the complaint. I hadn't lobbied for his suspension. He had made his own choices, taking a case he knew was ethically compromised, lying to clients who trusted him, betting he could win through intimidation rather than merit. His career suffered because of what he chose to do. Some people build their own prisons without any help. 3 weeks after the will reading, an email appeared in my inbox from beverlyvance1969@gmail.com. The subject line read, "Please read." The message was longer than I expected. Beverly had never been one for written communication. She preferred phone calls where she could control the tone, interrupt, redirect. "Harper, I know you probably won't read this, but I need to say some things. I have been thinking about what happened at the will reading. I was angry, and I said things I shouldn't have. But I want you to know that I understand now that I made mistakes when you were young. I was overwhelmed. Your father and I were struggling financially. Things got away from us. I am not asking for money. I am asking for a chance to make things right. We are still family, Harper. Blood doesn't just disappear because of legal papers. I am your mother. Nothing can change that. Can we talk? I think if we just sat down together, we could work through this. I love you. I always have. Mom." I read the email 3 times. Then I called Dr. Foster, my therapist, and read it to her over the phone. "What do you notice about the email?" she asked. I thought about it. She acknowledges mistakes but doesn't name what they were. She blames circumstances, financial struggles, being overwhelmed. She says she is not asking for money, but then pivots to working through this. And she still calls herself Mom, even though she signed away that right. What do you want to do? I took 2 days to write my response. It was 4 sentences long. Beverly, I have read your email. I forgave you a long time ago for myself, not for you. But I don't want a relationship with you. Please don't contact me again. She didn't reply. I felt no guilt, only clarity. 2 months after the will reading, a letter arrived at my Chicago address. Not an email, an actual letter handwritten on plain paper, stuffed into a slightly wrinkled envelope with an Ohio postmark. The return address listed S. Warren. Savannah had taken her ex-husband's name when she got married. I opened it reluctantly, expecting more manipulation. What I found was different. Harper, I am not writing this to ask for anything. I don't want money. I don't want forgiveness. I just need to say something I should have said 15 years ago. The night Mom and Dad kicked you out, I was watching from my bedroom window. I saw you sitting on the porch with those garbage bags. I watched for 4 hours. I saw you alone in the dark waiting, and I never came down. I could have. I was 15. I could have brought you water or sat with you or at least told you I was sorry. Instead, I just watched from the window like a coward. That has haunted me ever since. Every time Mom would talk about you, always blaming you, always making herself the victim, I would think about that window, about what I didn't do. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am not asking for a relationship. I just wanted you to know that I know what I did was wrong. I failed you when you needed family most. You deserved better from your older sister. If you never want to hear from me again, I understand. But I couldn't let another year pass without telling you the truth. Savannah. I read the letter 4 times. It was the first honest thing anyone in my biological family had ever said to me. I didn't write back immediately. I needed time to figure out what, if anything, I wanted to do with this unexpected opening. But for the first time in 15 years, I felt something other than distance when I thought about my sister. 4 months after the will reading, I finally wrote back to Savannah. Dr. Foster had helped me think through what I actually wanted. Not what I felt obligated to do. Not what would look generous or forgiving. What I genuinely wanted for myself. The answer surprised me. I didn't want to shut Savannah out completely. Her letter had been the first honest acknowledgement of what happened that night. No excuses, no deflection, no requests for money, just accountability. But I also wasn't ready to trust her. 15 years of distance doesn't disappear because of one letter. So I wrote back with conditions. Savannah, I have read your letter many times. I appreciate that you acknowledged what happened without making excuses. That took courage. I am not ready for a full relationship, but I am open to cautious contact under these conditions. First, no contact through Mom or Dad. I have ended communication with them permanently, and I need that boundary respected. Second, no discussions about money, inheritance, or anything related to Uncle Arthur's estate ever. Third, I reserve the right to end any conversation without explanation. If I go quiet, I need you to respect that. If these conditions work for you, we can start with a monthly video call. 5 minutes. Low pressure. We can talk about our lives, surface level at first. If that goes well, we can gradually build from there. This isn't me saying everything is forgiven and forgotten. This is me saying I am willing to see if there is something worth building, but it has to be on my terms. Let me know if you accept these conditions. Harper. Her reply came 3 days later. One word, accepted. I scheduled our first call for the following Saturday, 15 minutes. That was all I could commit to, but it was a start. The first video call with Savannah happened on a Saturday afternoon in September 2025, 6 months after the will reading. I sat in my home office with my laptop open, watching the seconds count down until 2 p.m. My heart was beating faster than it had during the will reading. This felt more dangerous somehow. Confronting Beverly had been about defending myself against an attack. This was about choosing to be vulnerable. The call connected. Savannah's face filled the screen. She looked different than she had at the will reading. Less made up, more tired, but also somehow more real. "Hi," she said. "Hi." We stared at each other for a moment. 15 years compressed into a video call rectangle. "I wasn't sure you would actually answer," she admitted. "I almost didn't. That broke something loose." Savannah laughed, a nervous, relieved sound, and I found myself almost smiling. We kept it light as I had requested. Surface level. She told me about her job. She was training to become a nail technician, working toward getting licensed. She mentioned her kids, Jaden, 8, and Lily, 6, without asking me to be their aunt. I told her about the business, about Chicago weather, about nothing too personal. At 14 minutes, I said we should wrap up. Harper. Savannah's voice stopped me before I could end the call. Thank you for giving me a chance. I know you didn't have to. This is step 1, I said. We will see where it goes. Step 1 is more than I expected. We scheduled another call for the following month. After she hung up, I sat in my office for a long time processing. I didn't know if Savannah and I would ever have a real relationship. Maybe we would stay in this tentative place forever. But for the first time, I was the one deciding what happened next. That power was worth more than the inheritance. The 14th of March 2026, 1 year exactly, since the will reading that changed everything. I stood outside a modest commercial building in Chicago's West Loop, the first property Uncle Arthur ever purchased back in 1987 when he was a 3-4-year-old, with a dream and barely enough money for a down payment. The building had been renovated last fall. New windows, updated HVAC, fresh landscaping. But today, I was here for something else. A bronze plaque had been mounted beside the main entrance. The Arthur R. Vance Building. In memory of a man who chose love over blood. 1953 to 2025. I touched the letters of his name, feeling the cold metal under my fingertips. In the years since the will reading, Vance Real Estate Group had grown by 12%, bringing the portfolio value to $26.5 million. Occupancy rates remained above 95%. We had expanded into 2 new properties and upgraded 3 existing ones. More importantly, the Vance STEM Scholarship had awarded its first grants. 5 students from difficult family situations, each receiving full funding for summer programs in science and mathematics. Dr. Rossi at Lurie Children's Hospital had helped select the recipients. Savannah and I still talked once a month. The conversations had gotten slightly easier. We had graduated from 15 minutes to 25. I had seen pictures of her kids. She had seen pictures of my apartment. We weren't sisters in any traditional sense. But we were something. Beverly and Vernon had stopped trying to contact me. I didn't know what their lives looked like now, and I found that I didn't need to know. Chloe walked up beside me, looking at the plaque. You okay? I considered the question. I am peaceful, I said. That is even better than happy. Uncle Arthur had taught me that family is a choice, and I had finally learned to choose myself. The sky over Chicago was clear for the first time in weeks. I could see all the way out over the lake. If I look at my own story through a psychological lens, there is a concept called conditional self-worth. The belief that you are only valuable if certain people approve of you. I spent the first 13 years of my life trapped in that belief. My mother's indifference felt like proof that I didn't matter. What actually saved me wasn't Uncle Arthur's money. It was his unconditional acceptance. He saw me for who I was, not who I should have been. Here is what I want you to take from this story. You don't need anyone's permission to know your worth, and you have every right to set boundaries, even with family, even with parents, even with blood. Forgiveness is something you do for yourself. Reconciliation is something you choose for yourself. These are 2 different things, and no one gets to decide which one you offer. Your story is yours to write. Thank you for staying with me through this entire story. If it resonated with you, if you have ever had to find your own worth after someone tried to take it away, I hope you know you are not alone. If you would like to hear more stories like this, subscribe and hit the notification bell. And check the description for links to similar stories about boundaries, family, and finding your own way. Until next time, take care.